Thank you, Kat. I'm Job Snyders. I work for NTT. This talk is an attempt to open up conversation with fellow network operators and carriers about how do we respond to BGP incidents. This talk is not an acute example of what is actually live in production at NTT. This is an attempt to solicit feedback from you as a community and to figure out how can we produce consistent responses if BGP incidences happen. I think in designing a workflow where we try to figure out how we can respond to BGP incidents, there are a few crucial steps, and we'll go through them in this slide deck one by one. When you get a call, it is good to collect evidence, make an analysis, and then react in some way. So, you receive a call. Somebody says, you are facilitating a BGP hijack. You're horrible. Then what? If they're right, you should immediately take action. You should alter your router configurations. You should do something somewhere. If they're wrong, you may cut off the wrong customer. And I think talking about this type of problem to produce a more consistent response amongst multiple carriers is why we are here right now. So let's go through some of this. Theodorat calls you and says, you are hijacking my range. What is happening? And the entity NOC should respond how? They should figure out, is this person actually Theodorat? Is he actually a legitimate holder of this resource? Is he who he says he is? Because the worst thing that could happen is that people call into the NOC claiming a sense of an aspect of abuse, and then that you shut off the wrong customer because of false information. So assure that the relation to the reporter is something that you can rely on and that you understand who they are. When they call, ask for specific questions. You need to figure out what is it they actually expect to happen in the global internet routing table. What is the exact prefix they're complaining about? Does their complaint match what you see in your BGP tables? What is the expected prefix length? What is the expected origin ASN? In this scenario, given that we've managed as a community to set up fairly complex systems where we are anycasting HTTP services, it may also be good to ask for a website endpoint or some other service where you can verify what the expected outcome of the operation is. So, when you receive the call, you pick up the phone, people tell you this and this is not as I was hoping it would be in the routing system. You should collect a steady state of what the network actually is doing at this moment. In the case of NTT, we have a filter generation daemon running at rr.ntt.net that is the production instance that feeds into our router configs. So if somebody calls and says something is wrong, inspecting this publicly available service can help analyze what was documented as routing intentions and whether that contradicts what the reporter is telling you. So these whois commands will give an overview of the RPKI or IRR objects that exist in the system and are used in the filter generation process. And they're the first step to understand what is happening. So here's some example output. If you issue a command like this, you'll retrieve the route objects or RPKI statements that influence what eBGP filters are related to this particular prefix. Now, another method of inspection is to go out to the various route collection initiatives that exist. There's the Analog Ring Looking Glass. RIPE NCC has produced a beautiful platform called RIPE Stat. There's a public instance of a validator available as RPKI validator.ripe.net that allows you to compare BGP information to published ROAs. And there's a tool called IRR Explorer that also helps understand what perhaps were the intentions of the resource holder. Other than looking at published information about routing intentions, it is perhaps also good to capture what is your network actually doing in this moment. What is in the BGP RIP level available in your network, and what is happening in the forwarding plane. So capturing the routes, capturing a trace route towards the destination that is hijacked can be useful to understand what is happening. And this is an example from an NTT router where in the upper half we see the normal steady state, which is what we expect to happen. But the second entry is the hijack that is in progress, where my personal ASN is rerouting traffic for this specific destination. Traceroutes are very, very helpful. Every eBGP router that exists in your network has a slightly different view on the routing tables. All of them have this tree view to all internet destinations you can reach. And traceroutes can help you in this instance to understand where is traffic actually sent. Because the previous slide is just one router, and if you have hundreds of routers, they may all have slightly separate information available to them. Slightly different forwarding decisions are made. So traceroutes are very useful debugging information in this instance. Should you be too late in the sense that by the time the reporter tells you, I was hijacked, or even worse, when they call you a few days after the fact and say, a few days ago you were part of a hijack, capturing this in-motion information is much harder. Retroactively analyzing why hijacks happened is fairly time-consuming because we would need to replay the state of the network as it existed during your hijack, or even search for the events where it went wrong. It's hard, but it's possible, and I think it's okay to do such things on a case-by-case basis, depending on the relation with the reportee. But this type of postmortem, analyzing what hijack occurred, where it occurred, which of your routers accepted the hijack, all of that is much easier when there is feeding into the public routing system observer collective, the likes of Isolaro or RIPE-RIS or RouteViews. If we keep contributing data to such systems, it allows us to analyze in retrospect what actually happened, what transpired, was this a mistake or a malicious act. The purpose of those URLs is not just to collect information on what the state of the network is viewed from within internally or viewed from the outside, but these URLs can also help you understand if something actually is wrong or not. In the case of the Analog Ring Looking Glass, you're all invited to pair with that, the web interface will indicate to you an initial assessment whether a route announcement conforms to published routing intentions or not. So in the case of this incident, which is actually a live example. I am, at this moment, hijacking Theo's range with his permission. But if you go to this URL, you will see that this is an announcement that exists, but is invalid according to RPKI published information. I've seen incidences where IRRs were abused in one way or another, where attackers would publish information for a few minutes, wait for filter generation processes to do their thing, and then the objects were deleted again to make analysis of what is happening harder. And the same goes for RPKI. Not the same type of problem, but this is information that can change over time. If there are compromised accounts, if somehow somebody obtained the keys to the kingdom and published information that is not aligned with business operations, it is prudent to capture this type of information. So I myself, I'm making copies of the IRR and RPKI every few hours to have the ability to go back in time. If you're not doing that, when you get a call from somebody, you're hijacking my space, it is good to collect the current state of operations that influence your network. Another aspect in designing workflows around BGP hijacks is to analyze whether the reporter is the same entity as the victim. I've curiously enough reported on BGP incidents where I was not the victim at all, but about a year ago when the US government was in shutdown mode, many departments did not have the ability to defend themselves because employees were benched at home. It's very strange to, at some point, call other carriers and say, well, you're facilitating a hijack, but I have no relation to the victim. But regardless of that, it's okay to report on things that don't necessarily affect your own business operations. You're, in a way, doing someone else a favor and helping them by what is in your mind the correct entity, reporting incidents there. However, in the case where the reporter of the incident actually is the resource holder themselves, it is also a fair question to analyze impact. If all their resources are hijacked or leaked, clearly that impacts their whole operation. But maybe space that they're not actively using is hijacked. This too is a state that can exist. And it's good to discuss with the reportee what they think the impact is, because in a network operations center, we need to prioritize what is the next task we're going to do, and having feedback on the importance of prefixes can help analyze, should I drop all the work I'm doing right now and focus on this incident, or is this something we can deal with in the next 60 or 90 minutes? Other than what the reporter is telling you, you yourself can do an impact analysis by investigating in your statistics system what this prefix represents. Is this in your top talkers, or is this a prefix where no traffic was flowing anyway? And this helps analyze the impact to the victim, but it also helps analyze the impact to your own organization. Actions you can take after receiving a report, after concluding that this is not what things should be. It may be your own organization, it may be a customer, it may be a customer of a customer that is introducing routing information that is not helpful. But sources, to use all the sources to figure out how to reach the originator of the misconfiguration or hijack. This information exists in RDAP, in Whois, in PeeringDB. Open all those things in your browser and call all the phone numbers. I found many times when picking up the phone and calling people, hey, you're announcing something you should not be announcing, that if it is an accidental misconfiguration, people are very, very cooperative. They are happy to help. They will immediately recognize, oh, you're right, 30 minutes ago I did this and this, and thank you for your call. Picking up the phone and calling wild strangers on the internet is daunting. It's kind of crazy that we can pick up the phone and call people and say, hey, your routing is interfering with my routing. But it's very, very rewarding. Almost every phone call I made in this context resulted in fixing the issue. So in this modern day and age, we don't really like phone calls anymore. We like texting each other. But when it comes to BGP hijacks, I can strongly recommend using PTSN. Should the originating party either not pick up the phone or not respond in a meaningful way to address the issue that you're dealing with, the next escalation level is to approach their peers or upstreams. Because at the end of the day, maybe someone is originating an issue, but their upstreams or peers are the ones that are amplifying the issue by propagating this routing information. And if you look at the AS path of a BGP hijack, what I would say is work from the right side of that string towards the left side. Call first people that are closer to the hijack rather than more removed from the hijack. The reporter of the issue should be invited to become part of the team that tries to address this issue themselves. What we're not really looking for is that random people call us about random routing incidents and try to outsource resolving that routing incidents to RNOC. They themselves, if they are the resource holder, specifically when the reporter is also the same entity as the victim, have the most powerful voice in instructing other companies, this is not how things should be. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that carriers can be a good ally to contact people or figure out who to contact or look at routing information, but as the resource holder, you have the most powerful voice in correctly stating this is what should happen, this is what should not happen, and this is how it impacts my business. So everybody should pick up the phone. Now, we've talked a little bit about how to respond to incidents, and of course I also want to mention how we can perhaps prevent some of these incidents. And in this day and age, we have two technologies available to us that are very helpful in either preventing misconfigurations or reducing the negative impacts of hijacks as they occur. And these are origin validation based on RPKI data and direct peering. Let's go through a small use case. In the case of direct peering, but a misorigination of a certain prefix, RPKI information can help your border routers make better routing choices. In this example, there is a prefix that is being announced by the legitimate entity authorized to announce that set of IP addresses, and there is the attacker ASN, my own ASN. And again, this is a live example. If you want to go through workflow trainings in your own operations center, you can use this prefix to try and figure out what is correct, what is not correct. The example here is that the CDN operator actually uses RPKI information to do BGP origin validation, and they have a invalid is reject policy on their edge routers. The misconfiguration is rejected because the origin ASN does not match up with the published ROAs. And this happens automatically. Nice. Should there be a different type of issue, where, for instance, there is either a leak or the origin ASN is spoofed in the ASPath attribute, what happens if you apply origin validation and it's combined with direct peering is that the spoofer will have a longer ASPath because they cannot necessarily spoof their own, the victim's ASN on the direct eBGP sessions with you. They have to insert themselves in the path and pretend that they received this information from elsewhere. So in this instance, even though from an RPKI origin validation perspective, the BGP update passes because the origin matches with the ROA, the fact that there was direct peering and ASPath length was a consideration in choosing which path to use, prevented the incorrect information from being used in forwarding decisions. So up until this point, many of us have done direct peering with each other for often economic reasons. We'll approach each other and say, hey, I have this bulk of traffic I am sending or receiving from you. It'd be really nice if we cut out the middleman, like NTT, and just peer directly. And that strategy to reduce costs, to manage capacity, to reduce latency and blah, blah, blah about all the benefits of peering, also coincidentally is useful as a security mechanism, especially when you also do origin validation on your border routers. So what I'm saying is, direct peering is cool for financial reasons, but also for security reasons if you do origin validation. Going back to how hijacks are even part of the ecosystem or are allowed to enter our global routing system, it happens from time to time that it was a misconfiguration combined with outdated or rogue IRR information. And that the hijack was possible in the first place because there were entries in the system that did not contribute to correct configurations. Getting rid of incorrect IRR information often is a very fast way to get filters updated to stop and hijack in motion. If carriers are generating their router configs based off IRR information, cleaning up the IRR information in and of itself is a surefire way to block rogue announcements. And if we go back to this example prefix throughout this presentation, the sneaky thing I put in there is a minute typo. The 2 and the 3 are really close to each other on my keyboard, and if I type it in once, copy-paste it, and then copy-paste it into my router configuration, this is actually how you end up with misconfigurations or routing incidents like this. The route object could be created. The route object was copy-pasted. That string was used in my router configuration, and there you have it. We're announcing a prefix we should not be announcing at all. So use this example in your network operations center, send them this prefix, say, I think there's a hijack happening. What do we do now? This is a suitable prefix for that purpose. And with that, we're approaching the end of my presentation, and I would like to open up the floor for comments, suggestions. What is it that is missing from these steps? What evidence are we overlooking? Let's design a corporate workflow out in the open.
Hi, Job. My name is Martin. I'm from Cisco Systems. What initiatives do you know of that are dealing with cleaning up ESL? One of the things we've seen is that the information, whilst covering about 80% of the prefix space, is irregularly updated and not well secured?
I didn't entirely catch your question. Can you repeat or rephrase?
So there's a big effort being done with ROA and RPKI in dealing with coverage and updating prefix space, but RPSL seems to have been left behind.
There are some efforts underway to reduce the negative impact that IRR can have on operations. For instance, in the RIPE region, there is a proposal spearheaded by myself and some fellow operators to leverage RPKI information to conclude what IRR information is describing impossible situations. And we're working to produce software that will use RPKI information to clean up, delete, or suppress IR information that is in conflict with that. So there are efforts underway to improve the IR situation or to reduce the negative impact of the IR situation.
Thank you.
Was I next, Rudiger, or were you?
No, go ahead.
Jeff Houston, APNIC. I'm following most of what you're saying and thinking this is cool, but the one thing that I found a little bit difficult to swallow was when you talked about direct peering and that as a defense against path stuffing. The issue that we see in reality is that at least 30% of all announced routes have prepending somewhere. And the prepend is normally 2 to 3 ASs. Now, if your answer is everybody else should peer with the 5 tier 1s and the entire internet should flatten to an AS length, path length of 2, that's a fine answer. I don't believe it, but it's a fine answer to the problem. The reality is a little more prosaic than that. Realistically, there is a large area of...
Which version of reality are you referring to?
Oh, the reality of BGP.
Well,
there is a lot of a capability out there to actually do path-based attacks, preserve the origin, and get rid of the prepends and insert yourself in. It's there as a possibility, and it certainly needs to be acknowledged that we don't have BGP sec with path protection. Origin validation does some of it, but there is still a class of unsolved problem out there that we can't just wish away. It is an unsolved problem. That's the point I was trying to make.
In my version of reality, the majority of traffic that matters flows over links where the AS path is 1. Internet is shifting away from a model where you use multiple transits to reach everything. We love direct peering for economic reasons. As I mentioned before, cutting out the middleman, which is the large networks, often is a sensible thing to do. So peer with each other. That is where I think internet routing will be robust. And we've seen that the average AS path length is not increasing year after year. Somehow it remains flat. We somehow keep connecting to each other. And I'm suggesting that this property is a security
The average
feature.
length is not 1.
Yeah.
I'll leave it alone. I think Rudiger's going to say much the same. I'll leave it to you.
Well, kind of. First, let me say I'm very happy about the excellent approach of starting to discuss this. I think we will need some way for many parties to contribute because the devil is in the details. And actually, the path, the use of the short AS path is one part where I was thinking I should just put in the pointer that the common GAO-Rexford policy of doing a local pref for your customers, regardless how stupid long their AS path is, for example, interferes with your security argument. And if we work such procedures and suggestions out, we obviously will have to raise things like that. and kind of, yes, I agree very much with Geoff that in the end, for really making sure that the AS path information we are using, we would need BGP-sec. And I always hate people who are doing the bad mouthing of the BGP-sec expectancies. But, well, okay, kind of, there are details where kind of, if you want to use certain properties of your policies and the technology, you have to correlate with other parts of your operation. And for the IRR question, yes, RPSL is behind and it will never catch up.
That is true.
There is no possibility to do that. It's 20 years old, actually bad design even then, and you cannot fix it, really. Get over it. You still can make some use out of what's there, but it is not going to really help.
Hello, 经纪人 Netflix. I have a question regarding ASPA. It's sort of solving the path validation. Basically, I want to have a better understanding of the context, like the progress we are making and the practical challenges as a community, like what are the options we can contribute and help solve push this forward.
In a way, ASPA is a reinterpretation of AS path-based filters that have existed for years. And then in recent years, I started branding certain AS path filters as peerlog. If you go to peerlog.net, you can review that presentation. And the downside of this peerlog concept is that it's a manually driven operation. We need to email each other, we need to call each other to instruct each other how it is we want other people's routers to be configured, what is an acceptable state of the network, what is leaks or hijacks. And ASPA is an attempt to publish the type of information where that we manually exchange at this moment, but do so in a programmatic way that is cryptographically verifiable. So think of ASPA as peerlog rules, automated, published in RPKI. Now, there are some challenges with this approach where it's not immediately clear to me if the published information described using the ASPA format can be correctly used in all contexts. So publishing certain things via the RPKI without being sure that they can contribute to filters in any and all instances is a challenge. And the CyberOps working group in the IETF is the group of people that are governing the ASPA drafts. And they ultimately, and this includes me myself, I'm a co-author of the draft, we need to figure out, can this actually work in the global use case? So it's underway. It's something we need to experiment with. It's something we need to actually write some software to see if we can extract this information and transform it into router configs that are beneficial. And we need help, we need feedback, we need input, we need people that look at this and say, I'm willing to try, I can write software, I can write router configs. That's the stage where we're at. We're engineering it as we speak.
Yeah. Thank you.
So with negative 30 seconds, Tony Tauber, Comcast. So a good presentation and offering, and what's maybe for the next presentation, or how do you see it playing for route leaks? Like, what would be the set of analogous things, or how would you do it differently for route leaks? Something to think through, maybe.
Ultimately, we, from a technical perspective, cannot really differentiate between a route leak and a hijack. The BGP protocol does not, in itself, carry a lot of information to conclude whether the update was fabricated or not. So what helps against route leaks, specifically, maximum prefix limits.
Oh, right. No, but in terms of the operational workflow to operationally address them.
I see.
That's what I'm talking about.
I guess that's a topic for next time.
The next presentation. Well, thanks. Very good.
Yeah. Hi there, Jason Bodie, Invesco. Great talk. Just had a comment among workflow, right, and perhaps something that sort of would go in the beginning of onboarding your customers or during the provisioning process, right? You have maybe trained your folks to reach out and to these folks that you're onboarding and saying, hey, you're going to announce these routes. Do you have ROAs for them, right? And also maybe a message out to the IRRs to say when you're doing maybe your annual POC validation, say we should take a look at this. You know, say, wait a minute, you have these resources. Why have you not put your ROAs out there?
Thank you for that suggestion. I'll propose to the PC how to onboard customers for the next time. Thank you.